This is part 16 in a series of videos in which I'm attempting to restore this MADAS mechanical calculator. In the previous videos I've been through and sorted out a number of faults with the actual mechanism. I've now refitted that to the cover, and unfortunately when I tried to run the motor up it had too much leakage to be safe, so I ended up having to rewind the motor. That's now done. And it's left me with a few repairs to do. Now when I'm restoring something like this, I try to replace as few parts as possible. I like to retain the originality. And also if I'm going to refinish a part, I try to make it as true to the original as I can. And sometimes I'll just leave them as they are if they're not too bad. Now one thing I did have to do was make up a new gear. The original gear was missing. This is the intermediate gear between the right angle reduction box and the calculator itself, and again the fitting to attach this was missing as well, so I'm not sure what should be on top of this, so I've made up a simple washer assembly to allow the gear to be bolted down. The belt, while it was on the machine, it had snapped and wasn't usable, so I couldn't find a replacement. So I've made up a replacement and we'll refit that. The only parts of this machine that I've refinished are the belt cover. It was in too much of a state really to leave as it was, and I've also refinished the motor cover. This was fairly badly dented and there wasn't really any way I could straighten it out without damaging the paint. The paint wasn't in that good a condition anyway, so I straightened this out and made it look presentable, and then I refinished that as well. Okay, so I fitted the drive belt, the drive gear. I've actually made up a small washer here to clamp it down with, and what I want to do before I try applying power to this is to check the backlash between the two gears, and because the gear I've made has got a square central hole, it is quite difficult to get it properly aligned when I'm cutting the gear teeth, so I just need to make sure that that hole is central and it's not going to bind up. So all we need to do is hold the gear still and then check the backlash by rocking the top gear back and forth, and we're getting about 1 thou of clearance, which is about what I was aiming for. Rotate it a few degrees, try again, and do that all the way around the gear. And we should be getting about the same backlash all the way around. Okay, that looks fine. So the gear is running nice and centrally. As I say, I've got the belt fitted. I haven't refitted the greases in case I need to strip the motor back down, so I don't want to run the motor too much until I've done that. I've now got power applied. We'll zero the calculator. Get all the numbers set to 0. Okay, and if everything's working fine, when I press the plunger, this drive gear should rotate in a clockwise direction. We should see the calculator barrels rotate. Nothing much will happen because I have 0 set on the lower and the top number, although we should see the central number increment by 1. So we've got power applied. I'll press the plunger, and indeed the motor's driven the calculator in the correct direction. The center number has incremented by 1 and we saw all the barrels rotate. Although you can't see it, the end barrels and columns are rotating as well, but they're all geared together, so of course if this end's rotating then so is the far end. We'll try it again. The number should increment to a 2, which it does. What we'll do now is we'll set a 1 on the bottom number, so that we're currently in addition mode. So if I set a 1 on the bottom number, then the top number should increment by 1 each time we process the operation. So I'll set a 1 on the lower number. You'd normally do this with the slides on the front panel, but of course the front panel's not there, so I'll do that manually, and we should now see that the top number goes to a 1. Which it does. So we'll do it again. That should now go to a 2. One more time. It's a 3. So we'll move this down to I think is the position for 2, and this should now go up by 2. It's actually not very well supported, so it might drop down a bit further and end up adding 3, but we'll get the idea. I'll zero this first and we'll see if it can add more than one at a time, which it does. It's added 2. We'll set a 1 on the second column and we should now get it's going to be either 12 or 13 being added. It's hard to say exactly where this is, and as we can see, that's exactly what it did. I'll zero the top number, try it again. It's added 12. Try one more time, 12 again. So it does appear that it's working correctly. I'll set a few more numbers. We'll give it a bit of a harder task. This is just to make sure that the drive belt and motor are working sufficiently powerfully to drive the calculator, and all the columns have incremented as they should do. Okay, so what I'll be doing from this point on is running the calculator through a whole series of tests. I'll put the front panel back on and put the greases on the motor, lubricate it properly. Unfortunately, I don't have this front cover for the gears, so I'm going to leave it like this. This is why I made a fairly fancy washer to hold the gear down, because this is going to be exposed. But the rest of it, I'm hoping, is fairly close to being completed. I can run some larger divisions and need the motor for that, because it can take thousands of rotations to complete a division. But it is looking quite promising. As long as the motor and the drive have sufficient power to move the carriage across, then we are getting fairly close to having this series finished. In case you're wondering where I got the drive belt from, I couldn't find a suitable replacement, so I made one from a strip of leather, and this is 1.5mm thick real leather, and I cut a strip the correct width. It's an 8mm wide belt, and then I did a kind of tapered overlap and used some proper leather glue. It's flexible but bonds leather extremely well. If that bond fails, then obviously it can be stitched, and we'll have to see how well that survives. It's certainly working fine so far. The main thing with leather, of course, is it is slightly stretchable, so we'll have to make sure that I put enough tension into the belt that it doesn't loosen up over time. But certainly it seems to be working fine. We need it to grip correctly, and again, that seems to be giving us plenty of grip between the belt and the pulleys. But it's something that I'll need to keep an eye on. If we need to, we can go to a slightly thicker material for the belt, but I don't want to go too thick, because it tends to start to crack more quickly the thicker that you go. So we'll leave it at 1.5mm for now and see how well it survives.